Part 2, Chapter 9. May 27th, 1266. Badajoz, Spain. The blanket of night spread its cover over the Extremadura. The silvery blue light of the moon causes the whole world to take on a strange calmness. This land, in the middle of some of the hottest regions of Spain, truly lives up to its name, since it is certainly extreme in how hard it is to stay alive. Only present during the earliest hours of the morning, the cool mists welling up from the banks of the Guadiana River fool all into believing the land has finally been freed from the oppressive curse of the sun. Now is when they forage for life's meager necessities. Some think the animals in this region are nocturnal by nature. They are in a way, for they are driven into the shade during the day, and only at night can they emerge and not die. It truly is a miracle anything can stay alive in this environment. Inside a plain rock and thatched roof farmhouse in the middle of this desert, though, a different miracle is happening. "Push, push," urged Diego. "Push, my love, with all the strength you have in you. Push." With a sudden burst of hot breath from her lips, Maria gasped, "I am pushing, you idiot!" After saying that, a small part of her felt regret. She would think of apologies later. Right now, the pain felt like it was never going to end. She knew it would, though. This was not her first. In the 9 months leading up to this moment, she worked hard at convincing herself the pain would be temporary. Yes, it was intense, but she also knew there would be an end to it, just as glorious as for her other 2 blessings. Up until today, she felt confident it would be over before she knew it. She forced herself to display the stoic pride her mother, a weathered and tough woman, taught her to have. "Be proud of what you are," her mother would say. "Be proud nobody has given you anything, and that you are carving out an existence from this harsh and unforgiving land. Be proud." She allowed herself to enjoy a little smile between contractions. "Proud? Ha! It's hard to be proud when you're on the breakfast table giving birth in front of all these people. Well, at least the children are outside." Just then another contraction came, taking Maria's breath away. This one was the worst so far. She screamed loud enough for her children outside, as well as half the village, to hear. Anna, Diego and Maria's littlest one, grabbed the dirty, patched skirt of her oldest sibling. After coughing to clear her little throat, Anna asked, "Is Mama all right?" "Yes, little one," replied her sister Rosa, trying to sound as grown-up as possible, even though she was only 9. "Mama is giving birth right now, and that is always a noisy thing." "One more push, and it should be all over," said the midwife. Francisca Fernandez y Cortez was an especially new midwife in the eyes of the women in this area, yet she had been delivering babies for 10 years. Francisca lost count of how many she had delivered for the congregation in the area, but because she was new to the local church, she might as well have been a teenager in the eyes of those in Badajoz. Although they were friendly and polite, the locals weren't too quick to accept new blood into their inner circle of friends. There were many evenings Francisca spent alone, wishing she didn't always have to eat in solitude. While Maria labored under the strain, the midwife scanned the small cottage. The floors were bare dirt, stamped down by centuries of wear. The walls had been whitewashed so many times, the once rough corners were now smooth and rounded. In the middle of the back wall, a shelf held a small statue of Jesus, and there were beads draped around it. A warm fire overcooked the meal in a suspended pot Maria had probably worked all day preparing. Everything about this abode said simple, yet it also spoke of a close family connected with their past. Francisca saw it in the small vase of flowers, which formerly sat where Maria now lay, decorating the sill of the one and only window of this room. She hoped these home visits would eventually open the hearts of the people. "Ah!" screamed Maria. This was it. "Push now. This will be the end of your pain. Soon you shall see your new baby in all its glory," said Francisca, snapping back to the moment at hand. Maria had given birth to 2 girls before. Many of the town's women had commented to her how they were sure she carried a boy this time, since her belly was so big. "Your son will be strong enough to lift you both," was a common expression Diego and Maria heard. They prayed for a son. They hoped for a son. They planned for a son. Running a farm that can feed a man and his wife on this desert land was hard enough. Trying to squeeze out enough to feed a growing family without the strong muscles of a son would be far too much. As heartbreaking as it was, if this wasn't a boy, both knew they would have to figure out something else other than living here any longer. Although this land was hot, harsh, and unforgiving, it was home to countless generations of ancestors to Diego and Maria. It made them work hard for their living, and it is what they loved about it. In a way, it forced them to appreciate all they had, which wasn't much. 1 push, 1 delivery, 1 breath. New life received its first lesson of life in the Extremadura. Tiny lungs filled themselves with air from the new world and began to cry in protest. Diego and Maria would have been glad to listen to it all night. For laying there in the midwife's hands was a boy, the salvation of the farm and the key to their continued existence on the land. "Congratulations," said the midwife. "It's a—" "Thank you, Francisca," interrupted Diego. "I can tell what he is." Normally, the midwife may have taken silent offense at Diego's interruption. However, her attention was suddenly turned toward Maria. With everybody else rejoicing at the arrival, nobody seemed to notice she was not smiling at all. Without hesitation, Francisca gave the baby to Diego and immediately moved toward Maria. As she handed over the baby, Diego, being a man of the earth who prided himself on not letting much escape his notice, saw in the eyes of the midwife there was something wrong. His eyes darted over to Maria and was horrified at the expression on her face. Where normally there would be an expression of relief and euphoria, Maria had a look of intense worry on her face, brought on by the realization that the delivery of this baby may mean her own demise. Her face spoke volumes about the continued pain she was feeling deep inside. "What is it, Francisca?" mumbled Diego, hoping not to raise any fears in the mind of his wife. "I'm not sure yet. Something's not right. The afterbirth should have come out by now, but she still seems to be bleeding from—" "Ah!" screamed Maria. The pain hadn't lessened at all after the birth. The contractions usually quickly tapered off after the baby was delivered, but this time they continued just as intense as ever. This was the silent nightmare Maria always had brewing in the back of her mind leading up to childbirth. She worried whether the agony would just keep going. With her mind racing, she thought about her husband raising the children without her, because there could be no way of living with this raging pain permanently. "Permanent? Get a grip on yourself," she demanded silently. While Maria was wrestling with fears, anxieties, and depressions, mixed with generous amounts of panic, she didn't notice the faces of the midwife and her husband were changing, until her husband gave the baby to one of the townswomen who were standing there with their own looks of grief. What was that look on the faces of Francisca and Diego? Was the sheer strain of the evening causing them to really lose control? Was it so obvious she was about to die? Just then, without permission from Francisca, Diego kept his eyes fixed in one place and said, "Push!" "What?" bellowed Maria. "Have you lost your mind?" Before she could say any more, the midwife interrupted with, "Just do as he says. You are giving birth. Again." Those words hung in the air for what seemed an eternity. With no time to contemplate the spectacle of the moment, Maria involuntarily began to push. Diego raced to her side and did his best to encourage her to keep it up. He kissed her tenderly on her sweaty forehead, which made Maria regret the curse spat out to him earlier. For a moment, Diego forgot there was a boy who had just entered this world before his very eyes, because now a second baby was on its way. Diego looked over to the arms of the townswoman who held his son. "Son!" he silently roared with pride. "I have a son!" Stepping back to the midwife's side, Diego watched in amazement. Another head appeared, and before Diego had a chance to sit in the only chair in the dwelling, to give his knees a reprieve before they gave out totally, a second boy was born. Francisca gave him to Diego, who immediately gathered the first little one in his arms. With pride beaming from his tearful face, he presented them to his wife so they could taste the warm love and tenderness only a mother can give to two babies at her breasts. Diego, who had always been a man not ashamed to show the true way he felt, gave the midwife a hearty embrace and an earnest and deeply felt "Thank you." The townswomen who comforted their friend during the birth began to wail and howl in the sheer delight of having witnessed an absolute miracle. One after another, they gathered around Maria for the chance to touch and caress the new babies, as well as the mighty woman who had given them life. Diego once again reached over to wipe the hair from his wife's sweaty brow. He thought she had to be the most beautiful woman he had ever seen, the woman who had not only given birth to their beautiful daughters, but now honored him with 2 sons on the same day. As he stood next to the right shoulder of his wife, Diego dipped his head and silently thanked God for having listened to his fervent prayers for a son, and for giving him more than what he had asked for. He prayed that God would help him pay back such an amazing blessing. Crossing himself and kissing his ring finger, Diego reached out for his sons, who were now wrapped in swaddling blankets by the townswomen in the room. With his new baby boys in his arms, Diego marched to the front door, opened it with a shove from his foot, and said to the small crowd gathered for the event, "Behold, my friends, not only was God gracious enough to bless me with a son, he has given me a double blessing tonight. Raise a toast to Diego and Maria, for we have been given 2 sons on this day. I name them Hernan and Arturo, Barragon y Cisneros." With one accord, the townspeople shouted their applause. The fiesta in honor of Hernan and Arturo, as well as their parents, lasted well into the next day. Francisca, the midwife, especially enjoyed the celebration because, for the first time, she was personally invited to stay by both Diego and Maria.